Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to That's Just My Opinion. I am Merlin, and today we will be discussing A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas, Book 3 in the Court series. So, this one picks up pretty quickly right after where we left off, with Feyre going back with Tamlin to the Spring Court to undermine him. So she is playing the good, docile little wife to be. Oh, Tamlin. Well, the whole time she's just plotting and undermining him. And we've got Lucien there who's kind of like I don't believe you. And during this time, Feyre calls Lucien out for, not helping her when she was in a rough place, for just being there with Tamlin and not doing anything when he saw what was happening to her. But they kind of end in okay, Elain is at the Night Court, she's my mate, I want to go find her, and Feyre's like, okay, yeah, fine. So she's planning on basically setting Tamlin up to crumble because he is working with Hybern. Hybern is sending some of his generals to work with Tamlin, and they're just basically planning to tear down the wall with the cauldron and invade the human lands with the help of the 6 queens, which, interesting note on that. One of them did decide to take a little swim in the cauldron, but the cauldron apparently was pissed off after Nesta ripped something out of it, and it did turn her into a high fae, but it turned her into like a withered old crone. So after that, all the rest of the queens were like, yeah, nah fam, we're good. And they all went home, so now they've got the queens to worry about that are sitting there and plotting still to help Hybern. I still don't know why. Anyway, so Feyre's doing her thing in the Spring Court, setting Tamlin up for failure, and then there gets to a point where Ianthe, I screwed this up in the last video, I called Ianthe Amarantha. It's actually Ianthe is the very handsy priestess. And they're out, investigating the wall and the holes in the wall, and Feyre ends up catching Ianthe about to assault Lucien, and she ends up wrecking this bitch in like Feyre's got a dark side kind of way. Like, I'm not saying Ianthe didn't deserve it, but Feyre's got some darkness in her. They end up killing some Hybern guys, and Lucien and Feyre end up hightailing it out of there. They're on the run. They've got to make it back to Night Court. So this is where we get a little bit of Feyre and Lucien on the road. There's some tension there of like Feyre being like, just because you're Elain's mate doesn't mean anything, yada yada yada. And they end up having to go through Fall Court, Autumn Court territory. There's a little scuffle with Lucien's brothers. Feyre shows off some of her powers, and that gets them a little nervous because they're like, oh fuck, is his dad gonna find out? Because Baron, Lucien's father and Lord of Autumn, it kind of is one of the ones that they think that if they found out about Feyre's powers, they would be like, nope, kill this bitch, because they think they could take her powers back, the power back. But also I'm like, what, how do you know that if she dies that the power would return to you? How do you also not know it's just going to float off into the ether? Anyway, they end up making it back to Night Court, and the war is on. They know that Hybern is going to be attacking soon. They know that they've got to try to bolster the wall, and this is where we get Nesta and Elain, who post-turning into high fae are struggling. Nesta is a massive bitch. This is where, you guys remember back in my book 1 review where I was like, Nesta, I don't like her, but I can respect her as like a stone cold bitch. Yeah, no, throw all of that out the window. Book 3, Nesta is just awful and horrible and just, fine, I guess I'll help you. I hate Nesta. Elain has gone into a massive depressive episode where she's not eating, she's not doing, they're actively watching her because they think there's a chance she might try to harm herself. Elain is in a rough place, and I'm just like, oh god, that's, yeah, because you find out she was engaged, and now that she's high fae, obviously that's not going to happen. It's a bad time for everyone. So they end up getting Amren, who's like, well, we might be able to repair the wall if we use Nesta's powers because it's from the cauldron, yada yada. It doesn't really matter because in the end, it doesn't even matter. I'm really broad stroking the synopsis here, because the High Lords decide to hold a conference, the 7 High Lords of Prythian, to discuss the Hybern threat. And Rhys sends out the message, and it looks like it's going to end up being that 6 of the High Lords have confirmed, because that's one of the big themes in this one, is like Feyre telling them, like, you know, you have to take off the mask, you have to show the world the real Rhysand, not this dark lord of the Night Court, the bastard Amarantha's whore, but the soft boy, the good boy that we all know is in there. So they're gonna have this meeting of the High Lords to basically decide who's on whose side, and everyone's coming except for Tamlin. Go figure, because everyone knows that Tamlin has already sided with Hybern. So we have this meeting, and we meet the other lords, which was like, okay, cool. Beren is an absolute bastard. What did I expect there? Nothing different. We also meet Helion, the lord of the Dawncourt? No, Dawncourt, Daycourt? I think he's Daycourt. I can't remember if he's Day or Dawn. Either way, Sunshine. Who, at first he seems a little antagonistic, but you find out actually he and Rhys are like really good friends. I like Helion. Meet Wintercourt, who is also, I can't tell where he exactly stands with Rhys, because there's stuff with Amarantha that went down that, I think his name's like Cleus or something like that. It's something with a K. He's like kind of rough with the Night Court, but willing to partner up. Tarquin, who I didn't talk about in my last review, is Lord of Summer. He's still pissed at Night Court for events that go down there, but again, it seems like everyone is willing to put aside the grudges and just, you know, we've got a bigger threat that is Hybern. Well, and guess who rolls up into this meeting but Tamlin. Tamlin does show up, and the entire time he is just spitting absolute vitriol, calling Feyre the whore of a whore, and just like all of this awful stuff. Helion does tell him to shut the fuck up, which is very much appreciated, but it's one of the things with this book that Feyre and Rhys are mates, and they talk about like how rare it is to find your mate, and how, oh my god, it's amazing when you find a mate. And I kind of like, it gets into a world building problem with that I have of, I feel like all the other High Lords should be telling Tamlin, dude, get over it, they're mates. Like, I feel like mate should be like the one excuse, like, say if you were even married and you found your mate, that's like the grounds for divorce, of like, nope, I want to be with my mate, which I'll get into my problems with the mate issue later. So they have the meeting, they talk to Helion. You end up finding out that Lucien is actually Helion's son. Apparently Helion and Lady Autumn had a thing back in the day. But Lucien doesn't know this. Lucien isn't even present at this meeting. He's gone to the mortal realm to try to find this 6th queen. It's a whole thing. So Lucien isn't even there, so I'm just like, what's the point of this? And it's unclear if Helion even knows that Lucien is his son. And yeah, it was kind of a, what's the point? Maybe set up for a future book? I'm not certain. So they have the meeting. Basically, they all agree that they're going to work together. Even Tamlin sounds like he wants to pull a double cross on Hybern. Whoop diddly doodle. They go, there ends up being a big, they're getting ready for, I am broad stroking this here. I'm skipping over some of the littler battles. We get to the big final battle where Nesta is able to like communicate. She's trying to find the cauldron. But then Elaine gets kidnapped randomly, and they have to go do a random stealth mission to save Elaine, and Tamlin kind of helps them out, but Hybern doesn't kill him right then and there. So I don't know if Tamlin got caught. It's very weird. They save Elaine. The final battle happens. Feyre is going with Amren to try to destroy the cauldron, and it looks like for half a second that Amren betrays them, which when that came up that Feyre was like, Amren has betrayed us, I'm like, this makes no sense that Amren would betray them. And Amren ends up going, there's one way for us to be able to stop this, and she jumps into the cauldron and comes out in her true form, because remember how, like I said in the last review, that Amren is some massive ancient creature? You find out she's an angel, and I mean a Judeo-Christian Old Testament kind of fire angel, and she comes in and wrecks a bunch of guys. Oh, also the humans randomly show up and help out, and Nesta's, the girl's dad, is leading the fight, and Feyre ends up seeing Nesta. This book should have been written from multiple perspectives, but anyway, Nesta ends up with Cassian. Cassian's really hurt. The King of Hybern is like gonna kill them. Their father randomly shows up, and the King of Hybern is like, do what I say or I'll kill your father. And Nesta's like, okay, I will. And then the King of Hybern kills their dad, and I was like, why did you just kill your leverage? That's short-sighted. Nesta ends up killing the King of Hybern. The war is won. Yippee-doo. The thing with Amren, because I guess Hybern gets killed before Amren jumps in the cauldron and comes out in her angelic form, because the King of Hybern died, but the war is still going on, and Feyre's like, oh god, no, what do we do? And that's where Amren jumps in the cauldron and goes and kicks ass in her angelic form. But because of her power, she like shredded the cauldron apart, and it's like, if the cauldron is destroyed, the world is destroyed. And she's like, oh god, what do we do? What do we do? Rhys is there, and he's like, channel my power through this, and we'll put it back together. And Feyre does, but in the process, Rhys dies. And she's like standing over his body and like crying and screaming, like, no, come back, don't leave me, don't leave me. And guess what? All 7 High Lords are there. Well, I mean, Feyre kinda counts as one of them, because she has a little bit of all of their power. And they do what they did for Feyre, and they bring Rhys back, including Tamlin. Tamlin gives part of his power to bring Rhys back, and he's just like, be happy, Feyre. And I don't buy it for a second, because like, the way they, like, everything that's gone down with Tamlin, I think he would have been petty enough to walk away and been like, no, I lost my love. You will lose your love. But whatever, Rhys is fine. And he's like, oh, I held on for you. And in the blackness, because also that's the thing, when Amren goes angelic, she burns herself out, basically. She dies. But then, of course, Rhys goes, well, I saw someone there waiting with me. And Amren is fine. And she's okay. And then there's a party. Everyone is happy. Rhys and Feyre make a promise that if they die, they will die together. And it's a bond, so it's important, because I've already read book 4, and I'll get into that in another day. And yay, woohoo, there's still problems, because the queen who got turned into a fae is still out there, and that is the end. Feyre and Rhys, well, I'm not going to say live happily ever after, because I've read book 4 and there are things in that. So getting into my thoughts on this book, I can't even really say is a romance, because I mean, it is a romance in the fact that the romantic relationship between Feyre and Rhys is still incredibly important to the story, but it's not the point. It's not the focus of the story. The focus is more of this fantasy world, this high fantasy with this big epic battle and all of these pieces. And that is where this book absolutely loses me, because yeah, just the world building I don't think really supports a lot of the ideas of this giant war, because some of my biggest problems with this comes down to the cultural identity of Prythian, which is where the 7 lords are, and how they really don't feel like a united country. I almost kind of wanted to see in Prythian more of a Greek city-states idea, where they may fight with each other, they may hate each other at points, but when an external threat comes in, no, we are gonna take care of ourselves because we are Prythians. There really isn't that. So that was the thing when, like, especially Beren ends up agreeing to side with them. I'm like, I feel like Beren should be like, nah, screw you guys, I'm gonna go side with Hybern. And it really fell apart for me, and there's a lot of other stuff in this that I was just like, okay, like the Helion being Lucian's father thing. I'm like, is this just set up for a future book? I really think if it was, maybe it shouldn't have been revealed now because the characters that learn this have an oh shit moment, but it doesn't impact them in any way. Where it's not Lucien that's learning the news, it's not Helion that's learning the news, it's just Rhys and Feyre going, oh god, that's his dad, and that's it. So if it was something where for a future book, because Lucien, I feel like keeps getting done dirty in these later books, because I really like Lucien. Okay, I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion, but I really liked him. I liked him in book 1, where he's the snarky, like, best friend, and, like, I liked his relationship with Feyre. Where in book 2, he just gets sidelined and made Tamlin's bitch, and I don't believe, and that was something I think in book 2 when Tamlin's character gets Sparta kicked off a cliff to make him the bad guy, that I would have really liked a scene in book 2 where maybe Feyre walks in at the end of an argument between Lucien and Tamlin, where you could infer through the dialogue that Lucien is arguing about Feyre, that, like, you know, dude, you're killing her, but Tamlin is pulling some know your place, Lucien kind of thing, to actually show that Lucien is trying to help her, but Tamlin is the one stopping him, instead of him just being like, be patient, Feyre. Because then in this one, we have now Lucien is mated to Elain, and you can tell Lucien's a good guy. He just wants an opportunity to get to know Elain, at least that's how I read it. He wants to get to know her, he wants to understand her, and just get to know his mate. But, like, you've got Nesta and Feyre guard dogging her of, like, you're not going anywhere near our sisters. And it's like, guys, maybe she needs someone who can understand her, because I don't know if the mate mind reading thing is a specific Daemati thing, because Rhys and Feyre are both Daemati, or if that's something all mated couples can do. But it just, I was like, maybe Elain can use someone who's an outside perspective, maybe, I don't know. But that is that. Getting into my problem with the mating thing. I feel like the mating thing is really confused in this story as, like, what is mating? Because there's a point, and I don't remember if it's in book 2 or book 3, where they talk about it and they say that mates are your perfect match. They are your equal in all things. Okay, fine. Fair enough. But then there's also, like, sometimes, because it doesn't instantly mean that a mating is going to be a perfect union. Like, we find out that Rhys's parents were mates, but they kind of hated each other. So it's not like a mated couple is going to be perfect sunshines and roses mating. So I thought, okay, then maybe the mating thing is just about baby making, because they talk about how it's really, like, Fae don't have a lot of children. So, okay, I'm like, maybe it's a baby making thing, that you're compatible to create offspring. But then we find out that same-sex couples can also mate. So I'm like, so it's not a baby making thing. It is just about finding your soul mate. Then why don't mated relationships work out? What's the point of a mate then? I don't get it. Yeah, it's... My biggest problem with this is it's trying to be, like, high fantasy and, like, epic fantasy with all these wars and everything, and the things that, like, annoyed me, especially with the ending battle, no one from the main crew dies. No one dies. There is no sacrifice for Feyre and Rhysand in this. Because that was the thing, when, like, Amren self-sacrificed herself, I was like, okay, she literally went out in a blaze of glory. I'm like, okay, I mean, it's sad. Amren was a badass and I liked her, but, you know, if anybody out of the crew is gonna have to take one to, you know, make some impact, Amren is an acceptable loss. But no, she's fine. Her sacrifice didn't mean anything, and that's where at this point in the book, with Feyre almost dying at the end of book 1 and being brought back, Rhys almost dying and being brought back, Amren dying and being brought back, we're hitting the point where death is no longer a consequence, it's a speed bump of, don't worry, just so long as all of the 7 High Lords are there, they're gonna bring you back and you're all gonna be hunky-dory. So that was my thing, I was like, for the Night Court, and I mean for the people we care about, there is no consequences for the war, apart from the thousands of nameless soldiers that get wiped out. That is it. There is no personal loss for them in this war, except for Feyre's dad. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that he died, but he wasn't even a character. That's like the way it's written with their dad showing up all white knighting at the end of bringing the human army, which I'm like, the way they talk about humans versus Fae, I'm like, cool, you brought some cannon fodder, yay, put them in the front lines, I guess, is I can't give a damn about their dad dying because I don't know him as a character. The girls don't have a close relationship with him. So when he bites it, it's like, cool sacrifice, I guess? I don't care, really. And especially for Feyre, like, we never really see her processing her dad's death because it makes sense. He wasn't much of a father figure. He kind of sucked for the, oh yeah, 50 or however many pages he's in book 1, and then he is gone for the rest of the series until the last little bit in this book when he shows up for the final battle. It's dumb. Some other characters that pop up again for the final battle are the Weaver. I didn't talk about her in book 2, but the Weaver and the Bone Carver. I didn't talk about either of them in my review for book 2, but they are basically like these death gods. They get caught, basically they make deals with them so they'll come and fight, and this other creature called Bryaxis, it's fine. They're just these minor, like, crazy powerful characters. But the Bone Carver and the Weaver both get killed. The way the Bone Carver dies, I buy it. He basically gets nuked, and I'm like, okay, I could buy that killing a death god. I buy this. But the Weaver literally runs into the King of Hybern, and she's like, bow before me, mortal, as it was in the days of old. And he's like, my lady, snaps her neck and feeds her to his dogs, and they rip her apart, and that's all it takes to kill her. And I'm like, for a death goddess, she went out like a bitch, really? But that's that. The setup for, there's a 4th book. There's a 4th one. A Court of Silver Flames, which I thought, just reading that title, was going to maybe be about Lucien and Elaine, because Silver Flames, you find out Autumn Court fire is a big deal for them as part of their power set. So I was like, okay, no. It's about Nesta and Cassian. Again, I haven't talked about Cassian, but he is one of the inner circle for this crew, who I see in the fandom people give him the label of a himbo, but he's not a himbo, but he is your big guy, he's your strong guy, he's your general. And it's them in a relationship. Yeah. Whew, I have thoughts on that, and we will get to that at a later date, so look forward to when that comes out. But for now, for A Court of Wings and Ruin, I would say I would give it maybe a 2.75. Because it's not really a romance, it's more of a fantasy, like a war epic fantasy. Not quite epic fantasy, but it's more towing into that lines, and it did not jive for me in that regard. So 2.75. Unfortunately, this series has kind of slid downhill for me the longer I've read it, and we still have one more to go. So look forward to that in the future. If you guys disagree with me, that's totally cool. Leave your comments down below, and I will talk to you guys in a little while.